Hey dear audio wizards and fellow music makers, this is the 5th episode of this compression Bible. In the previous video we talked about feed forward and feed backwards type of designs, about program dependent compressors and how to use compressors to create depth in a mix. So if any of those subjects seems unfamiliar to you, be sure to check the previous video. Today we're going to dive deeper into Sidechain, about the goals of compression, how to use Lookahead, attack and release time, and set a threshold in your Sidechain buses in order to get full control over your Sidechain processes.
Sidechain compression with purpose, with intention. So the three main reasons to use Sidechain, of course, there's the one you know is kick over bass, is making space, especially in the low end area where frequencies pile up when there's a lot of energy, to make space in one sound for the body of another sound, to gain headroom, to actually be able to put your whole mix louder and to avoid increasing of too much energy or phasing issues on the low end. That's the one thing, making space for the body. The other thing is making space, but for transients. If you have something that is buried in a mix and you want the transients to pop out, like let's say, for example, a snare over a whole music group, the transients of the snare might need to pop out to get more punch, more clarity. And so you want to just duck the melodic group on a short moment when the transients of the snare hits, so you don't need to push the snare louder, but actually you are making space inside the group for that transient. It can be snare over a music group, it can be a vocal over a reverb, whatever. And then the third reason is actually to create groove, to print a movement on some sounds. And it can be hi-hats, it can be, again, your melodic group, it can be your bass line. And for that one, you mostly are going to use kick with a straight kick or the snare. You want elements that are, let's say, symmetrical in your rhythm pattern, that are like Euclidean ones or whatever. But so you can use the compressor to make things bounce, to make it move away. Of course, for example, as I said, you can sidechain your hi-hats with the kick drum, but if you group everything together, this is also kind of result that bus compression will achieve. If you have your hi-hats and your kick in the same bus and you put a compressor on that one, when the kick is hitting, the hi-hats will be ducked a little bit, making them more alive, more moving around your rhythm.
hope you enjoyed this content so far, and be sure to like the video and subscribe to the channel for more no-nonsense content like this one. Sidechain with intention. So we talked about Lookahead and how Lookahead can help your compressor to start acting before the transient is hitting in order to be ducking all the transients. It's also something that can be used while doing sidechain, and we're going to talk also about attack time. So let's say, for example, you are using your compressor in a traditional way, things you have seen online maybe. Okay, you are ducking your bassline with your kick drum, and you want the sidechain to be acting fast, to be reacting on your kick drum. So you dial in a very short attack time. There might be two problems with that. One of the two problems might actually be something you're looking for, but again, let's talk about intention. So with short attack times, your compressor will distort. And so if you listen to the bass in solo with your kick sidechaining the bass with really, really short attack time, you will hear there's a little click, there's a little distortion at the beginning of every pumping move. This is where the intention is starting to play in hand. Is it something you want to get rid of because hearing that extra click is something you don't like? It's adding high frequency content on the moment the kick is hitting. Or on the contrary, do you feel your kick was a bit muddy, and instead of processing the kick, processing the bassline with sidechain, adding a click on your bassline is actually improving the way the kick comes out in the mix? Think about that. So instead of using transient designers or EQs on the kick, you might actually be processing the bassline with sidechain and adding transients, adding harmonics when the kick is hitting because the bassline gets saturated. First thing. If it's something you're not looking for, then you will have to increase a bit the attack time of the sidechain and you will get rid of that clickiness. But while doing so, maybe now you feel that actually the bass is not pumping enough and it's getting pumped too late to make space for the kick. This is where Lookahead comes in hand. So you're going to add a bit of the Lookahead and increase a bit the attack time of the compressor in order to have the full compression when the kick is hitting, yet without the extra clickiness of the distortion induced by the short attack time of your compressor. That's one really interesting and really important thing. Another aspect, and it's something that took me also quite some time to understand. Let's say you are having a more like funky bassline, bassline with fingers, with lots of high frequency content, like 3, 4, 5, 6 kilohertz, because there's the slap of the bass. If the bass is playing at the same time as the kick, if you put a really short attack time on your compressor, you're going to kill the transients of the bass, inducing maybe a lack of clarity on the notes played by the bass when the kick is hitting.
So if the problem here between the kick and the bass is not the transients, but it's just making room in the low end for the kick to make space for the kick in the bass line, remember, the kick takes a few milliseconds for the kick to enter in the low spectrum area. The few first milliseconds of your kick are only transient. This is high frequency content. There is no low end there. Many kick drums, for example, a TR-909, what's happening is just a pitch envelope on a sine wave. So the beginning of the kick is really just a sine wave, but really high in pitch, and the pitch is dropping really fast before entering in the sustained part where you hear the low end sine wave. So you don't need, especially, to get rid of low frequency content information at the beginning of the kick. So you might increase the attack time of your compressor, and so the transient of the kick and the transient of the bass are going to play together. Maybe this is creating other problems, and you will want to shave off a bit of those transients, to limit a bit, to group them a bit with some clipper or whatever. That's some other subject. But at least now you have a clarity that is the same for every note of the bass line, while actually just ducking the bass line when the low end of the kick is coming. Think about that. Do you want to shave the transients of the bass line? Or do you not want to shave those off? Would you like maybe to add some harmonic content when the kick is hitting and adding this clickiness in the bass line or not? Or do you prefer to add a kind of pumping effect before the kick hits to lead into the pumping with extra lookahead on your sidechain compressor? We talked earlier about the intentions and how to set up attack and lookahead. So if you didn't watch those videos, feel free to watch the previous ones. These are a nice introduction to what's following. So without any further ado, let's talk about release times, because I think this is the most common mistake while using sidechain compression, to be not setting up properly your release time. So first thing first, short release times will create more of a pumping effect. So if you want really to have a pumping feel, you might want to dial in shorter release times. But the first thing is to listen and to feel how this is impacting the groove of the sidechain you're producing. So too long release times will having something that is pumping out of groove, and too fast will make the sidechain a bit wiggly. So you want the release time somehow to be interacting, and this will of course then be linked to the tempo of your song. The faster the song, the shorter release times you're going to dial in. The slower the BPM, the longer the release, because you want the release to be working with the groove of the music, especially if you use kick over bass. There are other sidechains techniques where the rhythm is still important, but the main part is with kick over bass, because you want the bass to be interacting with the kick and pumping out, I would say, on the counter beat. Like the beat is coming and the bass comes up on the counter beat. So you have this kind of 1-2-1-2 effect. That's one really important thing. The second thing is actually overlooking the compressor types. We're going to talk in another video about the compressor types, but depending on the types of compressor, the release shapes are not the same. This is, for example, why I love FabFilter Pro C2, which has the pumping algorithm, and the release is logarithmic. So the beginning of the release is very fast and then it ducks, and you have this kind of very dynamic kind of answer on the sidechain compressor. But there's a trick you can use if you don't have specific compressor. It's actually by using filters on the sidechain signal of the compressor, because two things. First of all, we said earlier, the release is linked to the threshold. So the lower you're going to put your threshold, the longer the sound is going to be compressed. So the longer the sidechain effect is going to happen. So if you want a really sharp and pumping compression, you might want to put your threshold higher. Okay, but then maybe there is not enough compression. So if this is the case, there are several options. You can put 2 or 3 compressors in series having the same settings on the sidechain to achieve really the amount of decibels you want to get, to reduce really that amount of decibels. Or you might use another sidechain signal. One little trick that works wonder, for example, with kick over bass, is to put a filter, a high cut filter on the sidechain signal, because, as I said earlier as well, the sub-frequencies take time to develop. So if you cut out all the lows on the sidechain signal in your compressor, then what will happen is that your compressor will only see the transients, only see the peaks. So you can put the threshold way lower,
those transients don't stay for a long time. So if you listen only to what's, I don't know, happening above 1 kilohertz, as soon as the kick is in the decay phase, there is no 1 kilohertz anymore. So the compressor is only going to be triggered by the peaks. And while doing so, now you have full control with the release of the compressor to adjust the release as you want without being interfering with the original signal. So think about that. Filtering out, keeping only the highs, and now the release is just full release of the compressor, not being influenced by the decay of your kick. Another way is to use what we call phantom signals. It's actually duplicating the track with just a tick, and every time the beat is playing, it's a tick playing underneath it. You don't listen to it. It's not going to be played to the mass of it, but it's going to be used as a trigger for your sidechain compressor. That's another way to achieve that. So there are different ways around, but think about that. It's unlinking actually the decay of the original sound with what is triggering your compressor. And another thing to think about is when you set up such kind of sidechain compressions, you want this always to be happening pre-effects. Depending on the DAW, the settings are a bit different, but by default, for example, in Ableton, your sidechain is always post effects. But this means that if you are changing EQs or compressing or changing the loudness of the effect chains, this is going to change the loudness of the signal triggering your sidechain. This is not what you Another way is to use what we call phantom signals. It's actually duplicating the track with just a tick, and every time the beat is playing, it's a tick playing underneath it. You don't listen to it. It's not going to be played to the mass of it, but it's going to be used as a trigger for your sidechain compressor. That's another way to achieve that. So there are different ways around, but think about that. It's unlinking actually the decay of the original sound with what is triggering your compressor. And another thing to think about is when you set up such kind of sidechain compressions, you want this always to be happening pre-effects. Depending on the DAW, the settings are a bit different, but by default, for example, in Ableton, your sidechain is always post effects. But this means that if you are changing EQs or compressing or changing the loudness of the effect chains, this is going to change the loudness of the signal triggering your sidechain. This is not what you want. So to avoid any problems with that, always use as a source pre-effects. So whatever is going to be happening to the sound signal afterwards the hearable sound, the sound that is going to be played to the master, this is never being affected the sidechain compression. So if you spend time to set up properly your sidechain to have the proper attack time, the proper release time, and the nice groove as you want, you don't want to fuck that up with EQing afterwards or compressing or limiting your kick drum later on. Think about that, unlinking transient release times and getting full control over your sidechains without being influenced or without fucking things up with the mix later on. I hope you enjoyed this content and that now you'll be able to control fully every sidechain compressor in order to get really the sound that you want. In the coming video, we're going to talk about more creative aspects of compression and sidechain on effect buses and talking about serial compression. As always, don't forget to like this video and to subscribe to the channel to stay tuned and to not miss any bits about content like this one. Take care. Bye bye.